Well, thanks for sticking in with us into this second hour of this Monday edition of America Talks Live. And if you're just joining us, welcome aboard. Miranda's off today. She's going to be back tomorrow. She had a well-deserved vacation the last few days.
Right. And we're going to keep covering all the news for you here. In the meantime, Democrats continue to call for a delay to Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation vote following sexual assault allegations. However, a vote is still, at this point anyway, John, scheduled for this Thursday.
Now, this all comes after a woman named Christine Blasey Ford. She's a college professor from Palo Alto, California, publicly identified herself as the woman who wrote the letter to Senate Democrats, eventually got it over to Dianne Feinstein. Here's Blasey Ford, the accuser's lawyer, Deborah Katz, on CNN this morning, retelling her client's story.
She says that she was at a party in probably 1982 in Montgomery County, Maryland. She says that there were 4 guys there. These are high school students, as was she. There were 4 guys there. Were there any girls there that day?
Yes, there was another girl at this party, yes.
And has your client spoken to any of those other guys or that girl who could help corroborate her story?
She has not.
And why not? Is it time to do that?
That's not her job to do that. If this is going to be investigated, it should be done by investigators.
Was that Kavanaugh and his friend, Mark Judge, allegedly drunkenly locked her in a room during a high school party. This is back in 1982, where she claims that Kavanaugh pinned her to a bed and attempted to rape her. Now, Ford says she was able to escape when one of Kavanaugh's friends jumped on top of them. Kavanaugh and Judge have both vehemently denied these allegations.
And despite the 11th hour allegations made against Judge Kavanaugh, President Trump is still refusing to withdraw his nomination. A spokesperson for Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley said, a spokesperson for the Judiciary Chairman, there you go, Chuck Grassley said it was, quote, disturbing that these uncorroborated allegations had surfaced shortly before Thursday's planned committee vote. Republicans want Kavanaugh to be confirmed before the Supreme Court term starts, and that starts October 1st.
And that's where we want to bring in our next guest, someone you see on the show often, former federal prosecutor and the founder of Judicial Watch, now with Freedom Watch, Larry Klayman. Larry, great to see you, my friend. This memo, this letter pops up. Dianne Feinstein sitting on it since July. Now all of a sudden it went from first being an allegation of, well, by this woman, I was locked in the room for a little while. I was able to get out of the room. That seems to have fallen flat, my interpretation anyway. Now it's gone from that relatively innocuous situation to an attempted rape where allegedly Kavanaugh, held this woman down and covered her mouth. Having a hard time believing any of this, Larry. What do you say?
Well, that is suspect. However, the allegations were very specific. And Feinstein, for whatever reason, held it back. I don't know what's in her mind. They're obviously doing a Hail Mary here in many ways. It's very similar to Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill, that entire situation. But the allegations are much worse than against Clarence Thomas.
But let me ask you this, Larry, not to interrupt. Are they specific? When we talk about specific allegations, and I contrast this against Keith Ellison, in the Ellison case, I've got recent allegations. I've got 2 complaining victims. They're very detailed, very consistent. We've got photos. We've got audio. We've got supporting witnesses, the son of the most recent victim. And we've got, for the 2006 alleged victim, a very detailed transcript of a 911 call. We don't have any of that in the Kavanaugh case.
No, I agree with you. It is suspect.
And we have differing inconsistent accounts, don't we? First it was I was locked in the room, then I got out. Then it was I was held down on the bed, but his friend knocked him off. Then that became attempted rape. In her therapist notes, it was 4 attackers. Her story, it's 2 attackers.
But John, this is all from a repressed memory in a therapy session.
But she never mentioned Kavanaugh.
Later, and Larry, my question to you is, are repressed memories even admissible as evidence?
Well, yeah, coming from the source, you just have to weigh the weight of that evidence.
Right.
But there was a letter, and that letter apparently is very specific. However, let's put law aside here, because unfortunately law doesn't apply that much these days, particularly in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
The dynamic here is the Republicans can't ram this nomination through this week, or they're going to offend a lot of women throughout the country. We now are in a Me Too movement right now, so much more intense than it was during Clarence Thomas in terms of taking these allegations seriously.
Right.
And if they do that, they will probably lose both houses of Congress. That's my prediction.
But then, Larry, so what's the option? Then you just allow false allegations to bully the Republican Party because of the Me Too movement.
And to delay a confirmation in the 11th hour like this, Larry, isn't that very suspect?
That's not what I would do. Okay?
What would you do?
I mean, I do things, I hope, on principle. I hope you all see that. But you're dealing with Republicans. You know, you're dealing with the establishment, with people who are afraid of their shadow, who run for the exits. You know, whether it's Black Lives Matter issues or whether it's Me Too issues, they will run from this. And that's my prediction. And Jeff Flake is just the first to put his foot down, in his words, to have some kind of testimony here. Kellyanne Conway suggested that herself.
What do you think of that strategy, Larry? What do you think about having this woman testify? Look, I have no problem having her testify and be grilled, but I don't want to see this be a dog and pony show dragged out for 3 weeks. Get her in and out in a day and end it.
I agree.
Grassley's got to put his foot down here, right?
Bring her in tomorrow and air the thing out immediately. But I'd say it's 50-50 right now for Kavanaugh to be confirmed because the Republicans are cowards. They run away from these issues.
Wow. Just to clarify, Larry, that's a massive departure from where we were a week ago when most everyone was pretty much agreeing, including Democrats, that Kavanaugh would be confirmed. You're saying you believe this accusation from a repressed memory with zero corroborating evidence, including the one person who was supposed to be a witness, has reduced the chances of Kavanaugh's confirmation down to 50%.
As a practical matter, because I've had experience with these Republicans before, whatever the issue may be. They run from these issues, okay? Do you think that they're going to run in the midterm elections by voting through Kavanaugh without a hearing? And that hearing is going to be a dog and pony show, a circus. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's why I say it's 50-50. And you know what? The Democrats might like Kavanaugh to be confirmed. It gives them a huge issue for the midterm elections with a lot of women throughout this country. So I think the Republicans are in the deep you-know-what right now.
All right, let's talk.
Trying to figure out what to do.
All right, sorry to interrupt, Larry. Let's talk about this accuser because it appears she has some potential conflicts of interest. For example, she previously signed a letter aimed at President Trump, a letter generated by the ACLU, aimed at fighting Trump's border enforcement. This woman, Christine Ford, is a psychology professor, as I noticed. She's a registered Democrat, as I've noted, signed off on this ACLU letter sent to the Department of Homeland Security back in June. The letter accused Trump of using border enforcement to, quote, traumatize children. It also claimed that the zero tolerance policy was, quote, violating fundamental human rights.
Yeah, but that's not all. Ford has also taken part in protests against the president, including the March for Science, which took place in California last year. And the San Jose Mercury News cited Ford as wearing a knitted cap inspired by those genitalia hats. It was one of a brain.
Shaped like a brain.
Right. Yeah. And we saw those at the Women's March, the ones shaped like the genitalia. This one was like a brain. Anyway, there's a quote. She said it's a science. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, there are a few other pieces of circumstantial evidence here.
Right. But important to note motive, right? You don't deny that it's important to note motive and the fact that I believe she was an outright supporter of virtually every Democrat.
Yeah, I want Larry to weigh in because, Larry, I'm sure you saw this as well, that there's a report, and I checked the docket myself. Brett Kavanaugh's mother was the judge in a 1996 foreclosure case in which the accuser, Christine Blasey Ford's parents, were defendants. Judge Martha Kavanaugh presided over the case way back then. So when you add all these things up, it starts to look, and by the way, her attorney, Deborah Katz, who we saw in that CNN clip, has donated over $25,000 to Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, and she's becoming her advocate. So when you add all this up, Larry, doesn't this further impeach Christine Blasey Ford's credibility?
It does, and she's also from Northern California, which is somewhere left of Beijing, China.
Yeah.
So that's a reality, too. I'm talking two things. I'm talking about the substance, the merits, and I'm talking about the way things work politically in Washington, D.C., and that's why I gave you that prediction.
But do you really think, Larry, even with the president who's such a counterpuncher, that the Republicans are still just the laydowns they've always been on these matters?
Yes, they are. And in today's world, look, there are a lot of legitimate cases with Me Too that are, legitimate. I'm a friend of Gloria Allred, as a matter of fact, and she has some cases that have merit. But in today's world, a man is guilty until proven innocent. Okay, you're just. It's a different atmosphere right now.
But Larry, let's go back to something we spoke about a little while ago. If he withdraws, I don't think he will, but if he were to withdraw, or the White House decides to ask him to step down, or he allows this. They allow this dog and pony show to play out, and they keep this woman there in testimony for a week, delaying the confirmation. Aren't Republicans then just giving the permission for Democrats to do this to every nominee, whether it's an undersecretary of commerce or a Supreme Court justice? Haven't they just given them the keys to the obstruction kingdom?
They have, but that's not their motivation right now. Their motivation is to be reelected. And they, if it's you or Judge Kavanaugh, guess who comes first, John? Okay.
Well,
they come first. They want to take control, keep control of the Senate and the House. And this is a very volatile issue, and therefore it's going to depend on her credibility. She claims she's taken a lie detector test, reveal that too, right now. And it's going to depend on Kavanaugh's credibility. And I got to tell you something, I became more of a supporter of Kavanaugh when these allegations came forward. But on the other hand, Kavanaugh has not been totally candid with the Judiciary Committee, whether it was with regard to my, so-called pet issue, the NSA, or frankly, what he did in the Bush White House. He wasn't totally candid, and one would expect, a nominee under that kind of pressure not to be. So he's already somewhat weakened.
How was he, but Larry, how was he not candid about what he did in the Bush White House?
Because apparently he did work on warrantless wiretaps at the Bush White House, okay? And that explains the decision that he made in my case, dealing with the illegality of advanced surveillance by the National Security Agency and other intel agencies. He did work on it, okay? And he wasn't candid about that. So, look, I've always said there could have been a better candidate, but right now we're stuck with the guy. And I hope he does get confirmed. And I do believe what's happened to him is totally unfair, whether it's true or not. And it is very suspect. I agree with that as well, particularly coming from this lawyer who looks like she's radical.
Let me ask you this, Larry. Let's just cut right to it. If there were no statute of limitations on this case, and it were prosecutable, and it were handed to you as a prosecutor, excuse me, my allergies are terrible. If it were handed to you as a prosecutor, would you feel comfortable prosecuting this case?
Not at all. I wouldn't prosecute it. It's ridiculous. What he did back in high school is ridiculous. I'm talking about the real environment today. We live in an environment where it's like the Salem witch trials in a number of respects. And the environment today and the Republicans are so spineless. They're so gutless. Why do you think they're on the verge of losing the House of Representatives? What have they done except pass the tax legislation? Nothing. They failed at everything. They've got a Speaker of the House who, frankly, is a Republican do nothing. Okay?
Yeah, nope.
Larry, do you think we're going to know something this week? Do you think we're going to stick with that Thursday time frame?
No, they're not going to stick with that.
Do you think we'll hear her testimony this week?
I think we may hear her testimony this week or early next week. And here's the thing. If this nomination goes down with the midterm elections, this may be President Trump's last chance to have his pick to the Supreme Court confirmed.
Wow.
Because the dynamics are really bad now. We know last week that Manafort flipped. I mean, everything is lined up against the president. I love the president. I'm supportive of the president.
Yeah, but wait, hold on, Larry. We don't have much time. But what did Manafort was around the campaign for a big 4.5 months. What is he doesn't have anything to flip. Manafort was already convicted in the first trial. He didn't have money to fight a second trial. The government didn't need to win the second trial. He took the plea. Isn't it a catch-all in any plea? Hey, you're going to cooperate with the government. It's not like they gave him a break on the 80 years he's facing on the first one.
Let me tell you where this can be backdoored, okay? And you don't know. I mean, for Giuliani to say this, okay, we expect him to take that position, for the president. It's fine. That's all he does is pontificate anyway. Doesn't do anything legally, apparently. But suppose Manafort gives testimony with regard to Roger Stone, okay, who was alleged to have contact with WikiLeaks, who had contact with the Russians. Suppose they wind up using Manafort as the straw that breaks the camel's back with his cooperation to indict Stone. Then they have Stone between a rock and a hard place. Do you think Roger won't flip as well? I don't care what he says. If they've got him dead to rights on tax issues or other issues, that's a tremendous amount of pressure. And you just don't know what's going to happen here. And there are others in similar situations right now.
Yeah.
And people do lie when they want to get off light. Manafort's facing life imprisonment.
Yeah, but
anything can happen.
But there's always that pardon factor that's just kind of floating around out there.
And the fact that the person you ultimately flip on had to have done something wrong.
Exactly.
Manafort could try to break 100 people. He's gone 1.5 years doing this. He hasn't found anything.
And the president's immediate tweet in his defense, I thought, was telling, as well as NPR saying this has absolutely nothing to do with the Trump campaign.
I don't think they've found anything either, and I don't think Roger Stone has done anything illegally, and I don't think than in the context of Russian collusion, either as Manafort. But again, we live in the real world today.
Right.
It's not just the Salem witch trials with Me Too. It's Salem witch trials on every issue.
Yeah.
And what Mueller's doing right now is writing a damning impeachment report that will take this president out politically, if not legally. You can count on that. Wiseman got up in the court the other day and went on for 45 minutes detailing everything he could pull out of where to try to hurt this president. And that's what we're up against. And, again, the pushback is not very great by the president's lawyers. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they're competent. That's why I've said I think he needs new lawyers right now.
Right. Well, Larry Klayman, we always appreciate your perspective. Unfortunately, we're out of time today. Thank you for joining us.
Always great to see you, Larry.
God bless. Thanks.
You too. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about a Republican senator who now says lawmakers should delay a vote on Judge Brett Kavanaugh. So it's going to get interesting.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to want to stay with us. More to come.